Hello, guys. How are we doing? Tonight is a really exciting night. I am interviewing Trent McClellan from This Hour Has 22 Minutes. So I think this is going to be a really, really interesting conversation, and I'm just going to jump right into it. Hello, Trent. How are you?
Hey, how are you? I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I have my tea, so we're nice and relaxed.
Nice.
How's your day been today?
Pretty good. I just finished a podcast with a bunch of comedians. So a bunch of Black comedians that I know here in Canada, just kind of talking about the Black experience and their experiences growing up. And yeah, it was really interesting to hear everyone's stories and how there were a lot of similarities throughout, but also how we all had very different paths and stuff. So that'll drop next week. Yeah.
Amazing. It seems like you're really busy and you're doing a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. When I first got into like stand-up, I was like, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian and just stay in that lane. And then it's like, got the acting bug and started doing a bit of that. Then I was like, oh, podcasting, what's this? I can have great conversations with people. And so now I have like multiple pots on the stove at all times. I'm like, oh, I got to turn that one off. And I had to turn this one off. So yeah, it's feels overwhelming sometimes, but I enjoy all of them. So I feel pretty lucky.
The entertainment industry kind of has a way of pulling you in, hey?
It does. It's like you meet people from so many different avenues of that industry, and then you go on someone's podcast, and if you don't have one of your own, you're like, I would like to do this on a weekly basis, do my thing. And then, as you know, like working in film and television, you're working with a full team of people to make this bigger project. Mm-hmm. And of course, stand-up is just solo, you against the world. So all three of them scratch a different itch, if you know what I mean. So I kind of, depending on what mode I'm in of the year, I kind of gravitate towards one more than the other. And so I never get bored, that's for sure.
Amazing. Well, I would love to hear a little bit about you. Did you didn't grow up in Calgary, did you?
No, I grew up in Newfoundland, in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, which is on the west coast of the island. And
yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous little town, about 30,000 people. At the time when I lived there. And then I went to high school there and my first 2 years of university there. And then I moved to St. John's on the east coast of the island and finished my degree. I did a double major in history and English, and so an arts degree. I was like, all right, now what do I do with this? I know, I get a job working with kids. So I started working at boys and girls clubs and community centers and that kind of stuff after I graduated. And then I had an itch to try stand-up comedy, but at the time, in 2003, there was no stand-up comedy scene at all. There was no clubs, there was no open mics, there was nothing. And I was like, okay, the job market kind of dried up in Newfoundland, so I thought I'll move out west because I knew Calgary was booming. And I go, I'll get a job, but I want to try stand-up. Once I get there, I'd like to go to an amateur night and just give it a shot. And then I did, and I was hooked immediately. Like the first night.
How was your first night? Did you get booed off the stage?
No, that's what I think. I think the reason I'm still here is because I didn't get booed off the stage. I often think if I had got booed, I'd be like, well, I tried it. See you later. Take care. And I would have just like exited. Yeah, but luckily the first one went well. And I thought, oh my, you can do this for a living? Like this could be a job and you could get travel and career and, not realizing how much work it would take to get into, really get into a flow of it. But I was hooked right away. I was like, oh, I'm in, let's do it. So I worked full time still at Boys and Girls Club Monday to Friday. And then on weekends, I would go off to like Bonnyville and Cold Lake, Alberta and Kindersley, Saskatchewan and, do gigs. And I'd come back Sunday and go back to work on Monday. So it was like that for 3 years. And then after 3 years, I left my full-time job and I was both feet in the water of stand-up.
Wow, that is so cool. I feel like I could never do stand-up comedy. I feel like I'm funny, but I'm not that kind of funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's a different thing to make a room full of strangers laugh as opposed to just your crew, like you're hanging with your friends. They all know you. They have a reference point. You have similar experiences. But when you walk on stage at 8:00 and there's people that are like college students to grandparents to people who live in a small town to people who grew up in a big city, you have to connect with them quickly and they don't know anything about you. And so that's where I think it's the art form of it is kind of learning the ropes of that and how to build an act and how to resonate with different people,
Right. And I guess in some sense you have kind of different sets. And if you're feeling one way about a crowd, you're going to kind of go off in another direction, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of being in the business for a while. You kind of realize you can have a lot of tools in your tool belt kind of thing. But when you first start, you're like, I have 30 minutes on video games, and I hope everybody here likes video games. Yeah. And there's grandparents going like, I don't know what he's talking about. What is the game? Like, I don't play these games. So, you're kind of, well, this is the girl I brought to the dance, so I got to dance with her, right? Because I don't have any other material. So as you get older, you kind of, write more topics and go down. You have more life experience to pull from. So it's a benefit for you as you get.
And probably not as scared as you've been on more and more often, right?
Yeah, it's like anything, it's like, if you go to an audition, it's like the first couple of times it's terrifying and stuff. And then as you still have a little bit of anxiety and nervousness because you want to do well, but it does become like a regular feeling. Like for me now, it feels like I'm walking into my living room almost, like I'm home, right. and all these people have come to see you, and you want to have a good time. And so it's just excitement to do it as opposed to, oh, I hope this goes well. There's less of that now and more comfort for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's interesting being in the entertainment industry because it has evolved a lot over time, and even going to auditions, I'm interested to see what happens this year with auditions and if a lot more are going to be virtual now.
Yeah, it's a good point. Even with 22 right now, like we've been confirmed for our upcoming season, but we have no idea what it will look like in terms of when we can actually start, because each province is different. We tape the show in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So, every province is evolving differently with this whole thing. And then what does a shoot day look like? What does the set look like? How many people are allowed on set? Are we taking temperatures? Is there going to be quarantine stuff that you're going to have to do before you go? So it's a whole new world. And so I think you're right. Everyone's just kind of figuring out their way. Maybe it's going to be a lot of online auditioning for different things for people who are auditioning for film and television and commercials and things. So yeah, it's a new landscape. Everyone's going to try and figure it out as they go, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think no matter what industry you're in at this point, it's all just about finding a new routine and kind of figuring out what is this new world that we live in.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting too that you mentioned routine, because that's really changed the way I've perceived this whole thing. Like the first few weeks, to be honest, I found really rough. I was like, okay, this is all brand new, and we're the self-isolation and washing your hands consistently. It was all new, and I found a lot of anxiety from all that. And I was watching the news every day and taking in all this negativity and stuff. And eventually I had to settle into a routine of kind of just exercising more, going for a walk or running or working out or something, and writing and meditating and stuff. Like I needed to get some structure back in my life, if that makes any sense, because everything else was just out the window. So you're like, well, what do I do? I needed something secure to hold on to. I don't know how it was for you. Like, did you find the same thing? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's again interesting that you bring up exercise and meditation. And I've been talking a lot recently, especially on this podcast and on my own platform, about being mindful and being grateful for the things that are positive in your life and recognizing the small things that are really good in your life, and whatever's happening, like just slowing down, taking a breath and just being like, oh, okay, I've got this. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for my house and everything. For me, I've been isolated alone, actually. So I live alone, and it gets really lonely. So getting back into finding a new routine for myself that didn't involve being super social like I normally am was very interesting, and it was really difficult, but definitely like exercising really, really helps. I know it's sometimes even just hard to get out of bed for people, but I always recommend, just get up, have a glass of water, and if you can, just go for a walk, especially if you got a dog, take your dog for a walk. So that's definitely one thing that I've been really, really focusing on. And I would agree that just finding that new routine and being happy with yourself is really positive. This podcast is really meant to be like a platform for helping people try to exactly do that, find their new routines. And hopefully we can help them and show them what we're doing. And I don't know if it will help everyone, but that's kind of the goal here. So what are some other things that you've been doing lately to really just figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you? Because I know some people don't like set schedules. Some people do really well on set schedules, but some people don't. So I suppose my question would be, what's your best advice for figuring out the thing that works for you versus doesn't?
I think for me, it was I had to replace all this time that I normally would be doing with writing, and then I would be doing shows or touring. So I had this big gap of time. I'm like, so what do I do? And I'm like, well, I have to have goals every single day. I have to have something or 2 or 3 things that I have to do, whether that's I have to get groceries, or I have to go for a big walk, or I have to exercise, or I have to walk my dog, or like, you just have to have some goals. And then when you check those things off throughout the day, you feel a sense of accomplishment, Mm-hmm. But the good thing that's happened for me, I don't know if this happened for you, is that I realized I don't need a lot to be happy. Like, I realized that even if you took all those things away, like basically my profession doesn't exist at the moment, right? It's like it's like you can't go to a comedy club and the show is not filming till the fall. So I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just a person in the world at the moment. And that's kind of scary, when you look around and you can't see the shore anymore, like you're just in the middle of the ocean, just bobbing, And I realized, okay, if you take all that away, who am I? Like, what am I? What do I stand for? What am I as a person? What are the things I want to focus on? And you're right, they're small things. They're appreciating sunsets and the sun coming up in the morning, and sitting by a river and watching it, and spending time with your dog, and doing Zoom calls with friends and family. Like, I started to really boil things down to just those small little things every day and feel gratitude for those. But if I was fully immersed in my career and I got to get this thing and that thing, then I think I'd be pretty miserable. So.
Yeah. And I mean, let's talk about your career for a second, because you are a very
It'll just take a second. Just
that's all you get. 1 second.
Yeah, you get 1 second. 2 seconds max. 2 seconds.
You're a comedian. You can talk fast, right?
I know. I can jam it all in. I can jam 16 years in 3 seconds.
Perfect. But you only get one. So
I get one. So I'm done.
Yeah. So what would you say was the biggest thing that kind of helped you attain success? Because I feel like you've made it. You're a star. You are on CBC. You host a major show. That is the coolest thing ever. Isn't that kind of the dream for everyone?
Yeah, I guess in some regards it is. Like, optically from the outside looking in, you would go, oh, this guy's made it or whatever. But I mean, you would know, like, I don't know if you ever feel like you've made it. Like, I think whatever you do, if you're creative at heart, you always feel there's the next thing you want to do, or there's another project you'd like to be involved in, or, as you spoke about, like, I'm going to do a podcast now or whatever. Like, I don't think you ever feel like you've arrived. And so I feel the biggest thing has just been resilience. Like, this business it'll break your heart so many times, whether it's going to an audition that you thought, oh, I crushed it, I'm just going to wait for a call back and it never comes, or I used to apply for comedy festivals and then not get them. And I was like, but I had such a good year and I wrote so much great stuff. And so it's that ability to just keep your feet moving all the time. And that's why I tell people when they're starting out, like, you really got to love the work and you got to love the process of it, because the outside stuff and awards and this casting director has chosen you, or you're going to be on this show, all that's going to come and go, and you don't really control it, So unless you're making your own projects, you're just at the whim of all these other people. So you have to enjoy the day-to-day process of what it is you're doing, whether it's stand-up or acting or writing, producing, whatever it is. Like, that minutia of the everyday things, even though there's going to be hard days and times where it's a grind, but you have to really deep down enjoy that. And I know it sounds highty-flighty and kind of whatever, but anybody who I've seen be happy and successful, that's kind of their mindset, because the other stuff is so fleeting.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, I think that when it comes down to it, if you want something in life and you want to meet a goal or accomplish something, the only way to do that is just work your butt off and work hard and go for it, because nobody else is going to do it for you, right?
No. And also, like, you put together this podcast and you put on a show. You don't really control how it's received in the world. All you know is you tried your best, you put it out there, you reach out to guests, you have your framework of what you want to do, you do the best job you can, you launch it out into the world, and then you move on to the next thing. And whether it's a global success or it flops, it doesn't matter. The work the next day is exactly the same. You're going to go on to the next thing and do the next episode or your next project. So to me, like, if you're putting all your eggs in that hat of getting validation from outside and the internet and trolls and stuff, like, you just be on a roller coaster of emotion, and you have no self-worth because it's all based on what other people think of you. And so it's hard. I mean, no one wants to hear negative reviews or hear that someone doesn't like their work, but I think as you get in it longer, you learn to toughen up a little bit and you callous a little bit, and you kind of go, okay, well, I'm already on to the next thing anyway. Like, for 22 minutes, for example, by the time our show airs on a Monday night, we've already started the process of the next show. So whether people love the sketches we did last week and the jokes, or they hated them, we've already started the process of making the next week. So we don't even have time to celebrate like, oh, we crushed it last week, we are off. It's like, no, like let's start writing now, crank it out. So there's really no time to celebrate in that regard. You know what I mean? There's always the next thing to do and to move on to. So you have to enjoy the work itself.
Yeah. And I mean, the industry in general is so tough that if you're not enjoying it, you're never going to really go far because it's just too killer.
Yeah.
When you enjoy it, it's hard, let alone if you didn't enjoy the work.
Exactly.
So it's interesting. So you went from comedy and now you're on CBC. This hour has 22 minutes. Tell me a little bit about how you got into comedy first.
So I went into that amateur night and walked on stage and started doing stand-up. And then quite often for stand-ups, as a result of it, doing that, people will see you, casting directors, and go like, oh, that guy, he might be good for this role, or he might be good for this commercial we're doing, or whatever. So then acting kind of was like a side door that I kind of slid into, you know? Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, it was a brand new world, but the beauty of it was, and I was trying to look for the, I was trying to look for the advantage and the positive. And for me, it was like, I would go to these auditions, and you'd see all these actors outside in the waiting room to go into this audition. And, you know, this is like where it's like, everyone's super nervous and they're just reading their sides and they're, you know, and I would walk in as a stand-up going like, I don't need this. Do you know what I mean? Like I have gigs this weekend, so I wouldn't mind getting it, but I actually I do stand-up full time. So that looseness, like I would walk into the audition being like, okay, well, here's a choice, and I would just go with it. I didn't get every audition, but I got quite a few because I think it was just a bit of a carefree attitude of, yeah, I'm not hanging by this thing. I'm not like, I don't live and dying on whether or not I get this role. And I think that helped me in a lot of ways, you know? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
It totally makes sense. And I think it really wraps well into the entire idea of just being very confident in yourself. And that even wraps into what we were just talking about, starting a podcast and putting yourself out there. It really is all about just being confident and saying, you know what, I got this, and I don't care if I don't got this. So.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't know what they want anyway. And sometimes they don't even know what they want. So make a choice, be confident with it, do the best you can, and then you leave it there and you move on to the next thing. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to go to a comedy club now and do a set. And the next day I'd get a call back like, yeah, we thought you were great for the thing. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think it went that well. But, you know, like I wasn't sitting by the phone waiting for, oh, come on, ring. I really need this thing. And I think that helped me in a lot of ways. And then from that, I submitted a writing package to 22 Minutes. I was trying to get a job as a writer there. So they bring you in for a couple of weeks at a time and just trying to try you out. So that happened for me 2 years in a row. And then after the second year, I was like, I think I might get an offer as a writer because they had me on camera as well. I was doing man in the street type stuff, you know, where you're talking to people walking down the sidewalk and asking them questions and different things. And I thought I might get an offer to come back as a writer. And then that summer, they're like, hey, how would you like to join the cast? And I was like, what? Yeah. So wow. In a way, I've kind of fallen ass backwards into many things now that I say these things out loud.
How long have you been on the show now?
This will be my 4th season coming up, yeah, which is amazing to me. I can't believe it's been that much time, but yeah, 4th year. And this will be our 28th season for the show itself. It's been on.
I was just going to say, hasn't it been 28 years now? Like, it's a long run show. It's really well known. Yeah, I even called my dad up and I was like, hey, guess who I'm interviewing? And he knew who you were. So if my dad was impressed.
Well, that's it. I've made it. I've arrived. Thank you very much. Thank you. Her dad knows me.
Thank you. Approval.
Exactly. I got the stamp. I know. I feel honored. I mean, it's like there's only so many astronauts, you know? And I feel like being a cast member in 22 Minutes is kind of like that in a way where it's like there's only a handful of us. And so I feel a great honor to be a part of that team. And as you know, like there's so many talented people besides the cast in terms of writers and directors and people who work on set and graphics people and lighting and sound and props and stuff. Like they just bust their butts every single week so we can put a show together. And so to work with a team that talented is just, you know, you feel fortunate for sure.
Yeah. And a lot goes into a production like that. A lot of people don't understand what the behind the scenes of big productions look like. And it's very interesting to see and to be a part of it. What's your favorite part of being on the show?
Favorite part of being on the show? I love the live audience. So like on Monday nights, we bring in our audience so we play back all the sketches and then we do all our desk jokes in front of the live audience. So
cool.
Yeah. So everything we've recorded sketch wise, we've made.
Mm-hmm.
I will now see for the first time on that playback on Monday night. So whatever we shot, I'm like, man, I hope it turned out all right. And so you're behind the video wall and they're like, I'm watching it back and I'm like, oh, they cut that scene out, or, oh, we didn't end up using that other part or whatever. So I'm seeing it for the first time, just like the audience is. Mm-hmm. So that's always a fun night. And to see the energy of a live audience is always fantastic and great. So that's the best part of it. The most nerve-wracking part for me is the table read, because every Tuesday we have an ideas meeting where we pitch the ideas, and then you write the sketches on Tuesday night. Wednesday, we have our table read. So that's the executive producer will select the sketches that they like, and now we'll read them with everybody on the crew, for the most part, is sitting around these tables. And so they want to see what gets a laugh or not. But as a cast member, I feel pressure because you've only seen these sketches 30 minutes prior.
Yeah.
You've only got to read them real quick. And then you go up there and you know the writers around the periphery, and they're kind of like, don't bubble a word. I was up till 4 a.m. writing that thing. And you're just like, so that's the most pressure I feel during the week is the table read. Because I know what it's like to be a writer and submit something and go like, please don't mess it up. Please don't bobble a word. Please don't, because I know that I was that person. I know what that feels like to have, you're like, and I didn't get anything in the show last week, so I really need to get my sketch in the show. So that's the most pressure I feel is during that table read on the Wednesday.
Yeah. And I mean, these writers are kind of almost putting their fate in your hands. Like, here's my work. Can you show it well? And if you don't, I guess I don't get the job. Yeah,
exactly. And some of these people are on trial, right? They're there for 2 weeks or whatever. And they're hoping that they get, right? So the first phase is it's got to get into that book first. So the executive producer's got to make sure that they select that sketch to be in the table read. Then from the table read, we've got to perform it properly so that it gets the laughs and timing is right. And you just saw it 20 minutes ago for the first time. So there's not a lot of time. So it's got to pass all these different levels. And even if it gets laughs, even if it works at the table, it doesn't mean it's going to get made. Like, it might still be like, well, it'll take us too long to shoot it. Or you put a car chase in there. We don't have time to do a car chase this week. Did you say helicopter? My first sketch that I wrote one that we needed a helicopter. And so I went down to the set the next morning and they had built the cockpit of a helicopter, like on set overnight.
Hey.
And yeah, it was amazing. And I walked by and I'm like, wow. And then one of the guys goes, you the new writer who needed a helicopter? I was like, yeah. He goes, really? Couldn't write something in an office? We got lots of desks. You couldn't have wrote something? And they're just busting my butt, but I had no idea. I was like, oh no, I didn't know. It's my first week. I thought we could just write any idea. So they still bust me about that. They're like, yeah, I need a helicopter this week, McClellan. You sure? Rocket ship? Submarine? What do you need? So
it's just going to be the running joke for the rest of your career working there, right?
Here comes helicopter guy. Here he comes, guys. Everybody incoming. So, so it's, that's part of the things you need to know as a writer is like, what can they make? Because most of our sketches are made in 3 hours roughly. So when we shoot it, it's 3 hours. Now there might be graphics added on top of that and editing and all that. That's many more hours later. But the actual shooting of it will probably be 3 hours. So, like they've got to build a set before that and overnight and whatever. So it helps to know what they can make. So that it helps your writing. It'll inform what you can write and not write. Because you're like, that's a great idea, but we don't have time to have a car chase around Halifax and a car goes over a wharf and it's like we don't have that time or budget. So
no street racing.
No street racing. There won't be any of that. So it's and some days you record 3-4 sketches. It's nothing to be like Thursday you got a 6 a.m. call time and you're not leaving till 6 or 7 o'clock that night based on what your shoot day is for that day. So you might shoot 4 sketches that day, which is all in different locations. Could be in a curling rink. Next one shot back at the studio, lunch break. Then you might have another one that's like at a home somewhere, and then you might be back in the studio again. So it's a lot of moving pieces and a lot going on.
Yeah, and I bet do you travel a lot for comedy?
Yeah, for stand-up, I don't do it as much as I used to because when I was doing stand-up full-time, it was like you're touring and you're just in different provinces, and I had my U.S. work visa, so I was doing shows in Texas and California and stuff. Whereas now with 22, I'm pretty much in Halifax for 6 months of the year while we're taping, and I just stay there, and then I'll do any kind of shows or touring after we wrap usually. So that's how it works.
Amazing. What was your favorite part about kind of traveling for work?
I like being on my own to a certain degree. I don't mind my own company, as they say. So the great thing about traveling is like you're seeing new cities and towns, but also is the solitude of it. Like you're eating meals by yourself. You stay in the hotel room by yourself. You go to the show by yourself. And so when I first started, I kind of just enjoyed exploring cities on my own. I put my headphones in and I'm walking around Toronto or Ottawa or Regina or Austin, Texas or Los Angeles. Like you just got to explore, but you also have a show that night that you're getting paid for and the adrenaline of a show. So all those things combined, I just really, really enjoyed all that. You know, I liked that ability of every day was different. Every day was like, okay, I have a travel day tomorrow. I fly to San Diego. I'm in San Diego for 3 days. I then go to LA after that. Like, to me, that was fun and exciting because I was not a person who could sit behind a desk and just go, okay, right. Yeah. Is it Friday yet? No, it's like I was
now quarantine. I've lost track of all the days. So.
Exactly. No, none of us know what day it is. And I think it's 2020 still. That's all I know. I want to watch with just a year on it. Just a year. And I just look down and go, yep, 2020. Good.
Did you find it really difficult when you were traveling so much for work to keep that routine that we were kind of talking about earlier? Like, it's tough when you're traveling. You don't have a set routine. You don't even have a set place to stay, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a little bit of planning ahead of time. So, you know, what is your pickup time the next morning? What time is your flight? Okay. What time will you get to the hotel? Okay, you could probably squeeze in a run or something before, whatever. Like, just being flexible enough to move with the day, whatever is presented to you. So I managed to figure that out after a period of time. And the other thing that I discovered about 5-6 years ago, I started meditating. And I don't do it on a daily basis, but I try and do it at least a few times a week. And that was a game changer for me because it allowed me to just, the whole concept of like not being your thoughts and, you know, realizing that thoughts are just kind of like clouds passing by in the sky. You're just watching them fly by. You're not in it. You're not reactive. You're not that emotion. You're the person watching that emotion. And right. that was a game changer for me, especially in this business. Like I said, with the emotional ups and downs, I was able to level out and be like, okay, you're not living and dying on any project, on any performance. And that was a game changer.
Yeah, I was actually speaking last week with Francesco Antonio from the TV series Bad Blood. And we were kind of speaking about that and how it can be hard to just kind of get out of a role or whatever you're playing at the time, get out of that emotion and get back to yourself and focus. I mean, even myself, I have a very hyper brain, so I'm all over the place. What would be your tip for people if they have struggles with meditation?
I think it gets easier as you do it. It's like anything else. It's like if you were just to pick up running tomorrow, you're going to have some rough days. Your muscles are going to be sore. Your body's not used to it. It's going to take time to develop muscle memory. And I think your brain is the exact same thing. The more you do meditation, the more you can settle yourself down. And also, and this is hard to learn in a lot of ways, is like being compassionate to yourself, like realizing like, give yourself a break, like give yourself a few minutes to settle down. Don't get angry because you just thought about, oh, I got to take the dog for a walk. And, you know, you're like, oh God, I ruined it. You know, like, it's like, give yourself a break. And like, those thoughts are coming in for a reason. You don't have to get angry because those thoughts came in. Just realize that a thought just came into your brain and then focus back on whether it's the breathing you're doing or whatever. But like showing some compassion for yourself, I think is really important. And like I said, as you do it more and more, it gets easier. You find more focus from it. And the great thing about meditation I found, have you done it? Have you meditated before?
My mom has done a lot of meditating all my life. She's always been very encouraging when it comes to meditation. And I have not spent enough time focusing on it as I should. I've been trying to focus a little bit more on it lately. I do have a hard time quieting my mind. And I think like for me, the only thing specifically that I've noticed that really helped was focusing on my breathing, like you said, and even just saying inhale, exhale over and over again in the brain, because then at least I'm only focusing on those two kind of words rather than everything.
And another great idea too is to actually I watched a video on this last night. It's not with regards to meditation, but just about getting organized. And my mind is the same as yours. Like sometimes when you're creative, like you just have an idea and that idea leads to another idea. And it's just like this crazy web in your head. And you're like, what did I walk into this room for? I wanted my keys, right? My keys. Yeah. Oh, I should write a sketch about keys. Like what am I doing? So to make a list, to write it down, get stuff out of your head, put it on paper. I'm going to write the sketch about keys. I got to take the dog for a walk.
Books. Like so many lists. I talk about that almost every single week on my podcast about making lists, helping yourself get organized, not only like daily lists, monthly lists, goals, overall, like what is my goal this year? Even bigger, think bigger. What's my goal for my life? And you got to start big and then you just work your way down the list and then you kind of split it up into like parts that you can accomplish slowly. Because if you start off with your life goal, I think most everyone would get a little discouraged.
Yeah, exactly.
So, small and starting off with, hey, you know what? I got out of bed today and I brushed my hair. That's an accomplishment.
That's a win. I made my bed. Okay, we're already cooking with gas. All right, great start to the day. The other great thing on a minuscule level about lists, and I realize this now because when I've done it, I've realized this as well, is that it leaves mental real estate for other things. You're not trying to think about what was that thing I was supposed to do today? What is the other thing? It's like you already have your list. So you've taken it out of your brain and now there's room to do the creative things you need to do or to meditate or to not have all those thoughts bouncing around because you've cleared them out and put them on paper, right? So you don't have to worry about remembering them anymore because you know you have it written down. Mm-hmm. The other thing about meditation that blew me away was I thought meditation was only great while you were doing it. So I've just given my mind a break. It's a reset. I do a gratitude practice as well where I think about, things I'm grateful for and sit in those for a second. But I thought it was just while you're doing it and then you move on. But it's a reset for the entire day. So now when you walk through the world, you're looking at things in a positive light as opposed to looking for the negative. You're able to not react right away because you've already had that mental reset in the morning. So if there's traffic when you're driving, you're not, this traffic is whatever. You've already prepared for there might be traffic on Deerfoot when I leave today.
Right.
And so you've already had that calm moment so that when the actual thing happens, you're not just hyper reactive. You're able to step back. And in entertainment, it's huge because you can be on a set, the day is getting long, you're physically tired, you're, mentally tired. It's like, if you've already had that time in the morning to get yourself wired, then it'll save you. It'll prevent you from having to apologize later. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I've been doing has personally been really helping me. Sorry, that was my dog choking.
Love it. I love it.
That's been helping me. My dog actually has been helping me. But,
I know, mine too, yeah.
Yeah, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. So he's like a little miniature pit bull. And dogs are great because it's unconditional love. Their needs never change. It's like I want food, I want affection, and I want to go for a walk. And that's it. And so with all this craziness going on, that stability of just what a dog needs every day, I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, it helps you focus, right?
Yeah. And what do you have? What kind of dog do you have?
He's a border collie cross pit bull. He's just kind of a mixed breed, but he's
nice.
Great. His name's Leroy. It's Leroy,
nice.
The baddest man in the whole damn town.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. True story. It's true story. Look at that.
Yeah. Hi. Say hi.
He's so cute.
Hi. Yeah. So one thing that I've been really focusing on, other than my dog, who's gonna
he's like, come on, mom.
Yeah, is not being emotional when it comes to things that you can't control. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, go.
Yeah, meditation's big on that too, because just the whole concept of mind, like being mindful in the first place. Like we've all had things in our life that were horrible or terrible or good or bad, but you could almost argue that something that you thought initially that was a bad thing, given time, turns out it was actually a good thing. Or the thing that you thought was amazing, this thing that you wanted so much, and then you finally got it, given time, you're like, it wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be. So when they both even out like that, you don't really have that big swing because you're like, I don't really know what this is yet. I know there's an opportunity, but I don't know what it's going to result in. Like you're always exactly where you're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like you don't need that big swing of like, I got this thing amazing. Okay, great. But now you have work to do. So you just got to roll. Now you get prepared for the roll.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's always like, there's always a new thing to do. There's always another thing to focus on. So you don't really need that big swing of, okay, I didn't get the role. You didn't get the role, but what did you learn from the audition? You know what? I didn't really prepare very well. I was nervous. I got there a little late, whatever. Like, you took a lesson from it. There's something to take out of that for the next audition you have. Then your phone goes off. Oh, I have another audition in 2 days. I have to go to this thing. So is it a bad thing? No, because you got the next role because you learned a lesson from the audition that you bombed. So I think you always have to look for that. And that's what mindfulness does. It allows you to kind of take the good out of things instead of focusing on what you perceive as failure in the moment.
Right. Yeah. I actually was listening to a live from a psychologist, Dr. Julie Smith, and she put it into a really good analogy. She was talking about how pilots, that you're on a flight and you're going from one side of the world to the other. And if you just tip the nose 1 or 2 degrees off course, you're going to end up somewhere in the middle of the ocean. But a pilot's job is to watch for the storms. And every time something tips you off 1 or 2 degrees, you make a little adjustment and you go right back onto the course, because you don't need some massive event in your life to get you back on course or to where you need to be. You just need to keep making minor adjustments. And when you see yourself going off course, bring yourself back. So I really loved what she said about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. And you realize that, you know, if you know where you're going, and you can, in the morning or whenever you want to meditate or do whatever, is that if you've already prepared for adversity, then it's not a shock. When you hit turbulence, you're like, yeah, I know that there's a possibility of turbulence every time I take the plane up, and I know what to do when there's turbulence. But if you hit turbulence, you're like, well, I thought it'd be a smooth flight, and this is like, you know, you're freaking out. It's like, no, you're trained to deal with turbulence. I don't think enough of us are trained to deal with turbulence in our life. We get up every day expecting everything to just work perfectly. I want to get in my car. I want my car to start. I want there to be milk in the fridge when I wake up in the morning, and I want, you know, everyone to treat me nicely. And it's like, it's not the way the world works. Like, you have to prepare for some level of adversity every single day, every week, every year. It's just the way it is. And the more prepared you are for that, the waves aren't as big, because you're just like, saw that coming, or I already know it could have happened, and I'm ready for it.
Yeah, you kind of know how to captain yourself and captain the ship or the plane. I love that. I mean, speaking of some storms, let's talk about some current events. I feel like you've got a very good opinion on this. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. I think it's, and again, back to what we talked about, it's like, you know, the COVID-19 and social distancing has been terrible. And obviously lives have been lost, which is, you know, an absolute tragedy, and people have been very sick. And that's a terrible thing. But then with this whole Black Lives Matter movement, I almost feel like the Black Lives Matter movement has taken on a head of steam as a result of the COVID situation, because people aren't as busy as they normally would be. Yeah. They're not buried in like tasks and running around like they normally would be. It's kind of right front and center now. You can't ignore it because you have the time. You're on your phone all day. You are reading the news all day. Like it's been getting way more attention. So I think there's been a silver lining to that. That's why it's taking on this life that it has and this momentum, is because people now are like, whoa, what have I been doing for the last bunch of years? And how come I didn't notice this before? I think people have woken up to it because they haven't been buried in the clutter that they were buried in before. So I'm just hopeful that we'll keep the momentum going, excuse me, and that, you know, we take advantage of this, because you know what it's like. It's like January 1st. It's like New Year's Day, and I'm going to start working out, and I'm going to be, you know, and you have that momentum, the initial, you know, excitement, and then it starts to wane. Come January 15th, you're like, I can't find my sneakers, and I don't know. So it's like, I'm hoping with this is that we continue this momentum. And a lot of my friends have asked me things like, hey, what can I do? Or, you know, they want to learn more. They want to they want to be involved more. They want to affect change in some way. And so I think that's conversations people weren't having 2 weeks ago, you know? So I think I'm hopeful that this is a big step forward.
Yeah. And just hopefully more awareness is spread. I think it's been really interesting. I believe that we're in a very kind of influential, interesting time period right now in history, just with the way technology is really expanding and the way even international communication is now so much more open with social media, and people have such a larger reach now, and people are creating these platforms. It's going to be interesting to see how that translates, and if hopefully that can help different relationships and just help bring awareness to things like racism and all of these topics that for so long were suppressed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's very similar to like the Me Too movement in some ways. That they're very different, obviously, as well. But I felt like at the height of the Me Too movement, I remember some of my female friends were telling me their experiences, and I was embarrassed because I was like, I didn't realize that that's what it was like to be a woman in the world. I really felt like, I know there are monsters out there, and I know there's terrible guys and terrible people and predators, all this stuff. But I didn't realize how it affects women on a daily basis, like how they have to get up and make certain decisions throughout the day based on having to be safe and thinking about what is the right step. You know, I don't live like that. Like, I'm a 6'3" man walking through the world. I don't think about my safety that often, you know, and in those regards, you know? And so that was really eye-opening to me. And I realized like maybe a lot of us have a blind spot. We have a societal blind spot as to, we live our life the way we do, in the skin that we're in our lane. We think we're good people, and we're like, hey, I do my best every day. We haven't looked around other people's lanes and realized like, oh, like it's a lot harder for you, or you have struggles that I don't have as a woman, you know, and I would have struggles that you may not have, you know, as a Black man. So it's like just that awareness of realizing that you may have a societal blind spot. It doesn't mean you're an evil person. It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means that you are unaware. You've never lived that person's life. So how would you know what it's like to be them every single day? So I think if we widen the lens with this whole discussion, you know, in terms of Black Lives Matter movement right now, I think that's a great thing. People can start asking more questions and being more inquisitive, and like I said, widening that lens to kind of see more.
Yeah, and I love what you said about that and how it really is just about widening it. And I like that you related it to the Me Too movement, because it does really show that there's just so many issues in our society right now, not just Black Lives Matter, but the Me Too. There's just so much, and there's so much hate in our society that it's a struggle to focus on the positive when there's so much hate and anger being thrown your way. And I hope that more people try to focus on just spreading that positivity. What'd be one thing that you would suggest to people just trying to get out of a negative mindset and trying to flip your brain around into something positive?
I think a gratitude practice every single day is also a game changer. Like I said, I combine it with my meditation, and it just wires your mind to look for that positive stuff every single day. Things that you would have taken for granted before, you just have pause now. Like, you'll see a nice sunset, or small things like just, you know, you make a cup of coffee or tea, and you're like, do you really sit there and enjoy it? Or you have it there while you're on your laptop, and then you check your phone, and then you have some of your coffee. It's like, you ever just sit and just enjoy a cup of coffee, you know, for what it is? But we're always multitasking. We're always in a rush. It's like, just take a breath and pause. And when you're on a walk, stop and look at the tree that's right there, or whatever. And I know, again, it sounds kind of all flighty and airy and stuff, but it's like, I think that's where the joy is in life. You know, it can't be for the vacation you get once a year for 2 weeks, you get a vacation. Like, that can't be the only joy in your life. Or come on Friday, finally it's the weekend. Like, if that's the only joy in your life, like, it's a rough day. It's a rough time for you, you know? So it's got to be those small everyday things. Having a good conversation with a good friend, spending time with your dog, picking up a hobby, like learning guitar. I'm trying to spend more time learning guitar right now, and I'm like trying to figure that out. So, you know, like just fun, enjoying small things. I think people think it's the big things that, you know, are supposed to give us all the happiness. And I think that's a mistake. I think you're being misled if you think that. Yeah,
definitely. Another question. So if somebody is trying to kind of create a platform, even say like a podcast like this, and sort of create a movement of change, what would be your best advice for them? I know it's very broad and it's a big question.
Sorry. I would say be authentic, like be true to yourself. If it's something you're going to stick to and you plan, that's the first thing, is that it's probably not going to hit right away. It takes time to build a platform, and you have to be consistent over time. And my podcast now, I mean, I started it a couple of years ago, but I had breaks where I didn't do it every week, and I had large gaps because I was on the show. And so, you know, you try to build consistency so that there's so much other noise out there. It has to have legs for a long period of time for a lot of people to find it. And at the end of the day, you want to be authentic to yourself. Like, what do you care about? What do you want to speak to? What people do you want to talk to? Like, follow your natural curiosity, and then trust that other people will share that curiosity, as opposed to reversing it and going, what would people like? What would people like to see and hear? Because, there's a lot of people in the world. So, I always think about bands, musicians. At the end of the day, you want to make the music you want to make.
Right.
You can have hit records making music you don't want to make, but guess what? Now you're that guy for the rest of your life, and you're like, I don't want to be the guy in the boy band doing whatever. And that's why boy band members, they break up and they go do solo projects because they don't want to be in the boy band. They were organized by some music producer to come together and let's give you an image and all this stuff. But they're like, no, I want to play blues music. I don't want to be dancing around with 5 other guys with frosted tips, right? So it's like, I think it's being authentic to yourself, and sometimes you got to quiet all the other noise around you and quiet what you think the world outside wants, and be honest with yourself and go, who do I want to be? What do I want to put out in the world? And that takes being quiet and being honest with yourself.
Yeah. And I think even just staying focused, and as we kind of talked about at the beginning of this, is just trying and just putting yourself out there and being confident in that.
Yeah, I think, like, if you look at, sorry to cut you off, but it's just like Joe Rogan's podcast now, I think, is in its 11th year or whatever. And I mean, that didn't start as a smash hit. Like, he started with a bit of popularity because people knew him a little bit from TV. But like, it takes time to build a following, and then people figure out what your topics are, and he just follows his own curiosity. He talks to people he wants to talk to. They're from all different walks of life because that's what he wants to do. But he stuck to his guns. And now, after probably year 8 or 9, it became a global phenomenon, and it's the #1 podcast. But that's 7-8 years of consistently putting out content and doing the stuff he wants to do before it broke through and became a thing. So again, it's about loving what you're doing every single day, because you can't predict the other stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I think being in the right place, as you mentioned, and networking is really important. For me, I always, when I meet somebody, my first thought is not like, oh, how can you better me? Like, what can I get from you? No, like, I try to always think when I meet somebody, okay, who are they first? What are they about? What are their kind of interests? And how can we have a mutually beneficial relationship? And I just think that if more people kind of stood back and tried to work together on their common goals, we would find so much more happiness and success. It's crazy how many people seem to be under the impression that helping somebody else or putting them up as successful is going to bring their own success down.
Yeah.
Opposite.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, there's the old adage, right, of like a lot of actors and entertainers feel like there's only one bus to Hollywood. And if that guy gets on the bus, that means there's no seat for me on the bus. And then you don't realize, like, dude, a bus comes every 15 minutes. Right? So it's like, you didn't take your seat. It's like, there's literally another bus right there. It's coming it's coming around the corner. So, but there's that insecurity, right? That all gets back to being insecure and fearful. And you're blaming somebody else for you not being where you think you should be. Like, this is a story you've created in your head of where your timeline is and what you deserve and all that stuff. It's like, the industry doesn't care about what you think you deserve and where you think you're supposed to be at a certain age. None of that matters. That's got nothing to do with whether or not you got that role or whether or not you get this festival or whatever. So it's like, you're right. You don't need to feel and begrudge someone else for their success. It's like, that person's also worked hard. That person's also sacrificed. And by the way, the other bus has showed up. So while you were crying and venting, you missed another bus that came by because you were so bitter and angry about missing the first bus. So I always believe that. I've always thought that. And the other thing I would say too about meeting people, like when I've met crazy famous people, the one thing I've realized for the most part is that they just want a human connection with people. Like, they don't necessarily want to talk about their own work and how amazing they are and whatever. They're just like, they would like to have a normal conversation with someone about the weather, or the Flames game is on TV and like, what's the score? Like, they just want normality in their life. They want to be around someone who doesn't want something from them for once, someone who's not telling them where to be, what they got to do. Can you sign this? Can you whatever? They just need like can someone just treat me like a person just for 5 minutes here? And they kind of gravitate to that. So I've noticed that myself, just being around other people. So just, we're all human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it can get really overwhelming when you reach a point where it just feels like everyone's at you all the time. And having that normal human connection is probably very sought after. Yeah,
but you realize where people, who might do like big Hollywood stars, but they live like, in Ohio somewhere. People are like, the guy lives in Ohio? It's like, yeah, because they don't want any part of paparazzi and hanging outside the Ivy and like whatever. It's like it's just they just want a normal life. Now you give up some of that obviously when you become a public figure, that if you walk into a Starbucks and people know who you are, then it's probably someone's gonna come up to you. So you accept that that's part of the job. Mm-hmm. But if you have like, Gerry Dee is a friend of mine, and Jerry's always been like, somebody wants to photograph with me, like I'm fine. But if I'm with my kids, we're at a park, it's like, that's a different vibe. Like, this is my family time, and I don't get to see him as much as I'd like because I'm working. And so, I think, again, just realizing that's a human being who's got a life and kids, and, he's trying to be that guy. So I think it's just stepping back and realizing again that everyone's human, and it's a job. That's all it is. It's just a job.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting job. I mean, the entertainment industry in general is difficult. Would you say it's been really difficult for you being a minority in the entertainment industry and in Canada?
It's interesting because when I first got into the business, even before that, even when I was just working with kids at Boys and Girls Clubs and stuff, when I would apply for jobs, I never wanted to tell myself that I didn't get a job because I was, a certain color or I was a minority, because I felt like I'm just setting myself up for misery and for anger and bitterness. And it's like, well, okay, you didn't get it, move on to the next thing, apply for another job. And I've kind of approached entertainment the same way. I don't want to get caught up unless something was visible or it's obvious that that's not the case, where you realize, okay, something shady is going on here. But I haven't experienced that. Like, so I've always felt like you put your head down, you work. If you're good enough and they think you're the right person for this project, then you'll get selected. And if not, you move on to the next thing. And that kind of mindset's helped me a lot. I haven't tried to dwell too much on if I didn't get something, why didn't I get it? Or because I think you can drive yourself crazy with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the narrative that you tell yourself. We all live in our own narrative, and no one else's narrative is ever going to be the same as our own narrative of ourselves and other people. I know, like, a lot of people really struggle with their own narrative. And like you said, it's really important to turn around and be kind to yourself and just say, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can. And I feel like the more that you focus on those positive aspects of your life, and just like you say, don't tell yourself, oh, I didn't get the job because of the color of my skin, or I didn't get it. Just don't go into those negative thought patterns and just think, you know what, it was meant to be. There was a reason that I didn't get that job. Something bad might have happened or something,
Yeah, exactly. And if you see something that is like, it's definitely wrong, or you see something that was sexist or racist, by all means call it out. But I've always felt like, unless you know that for sure, it's like, I think one of the superpowers you have to have in entertainment is the ability to just move forward, to not dwell on any failure or any shortcoming. It's like, okay, that didn't work. Boom. It hurts. It stings. Let it sit for a little bit. And you move on to the next thing. That's really important, because we all know that person who sits around going, yeah, I was supposed to get that role or that project, and that would have changed my life. And I'm like, no one wants to be around that person. Nobody's like, oh my God, she's still telling the story about 1988, about how they were supposed to be on The Littlest Hobo. Like, it's just like, what? Really? We're still doing that one? Like, that they never moved on. They never ever let it go and just moved on and focused on the next thing. And so I think in life, that's a superpower. If you could just, take your wounds, dust yourself off, and like, all right, what did I learn from it? And let's go again.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because Julie Smith, the psychologist that I mentioned earlier, she said if you are too busy worrying about the future, you're going to raise your anxiety levels. And if you're too busy worrying about the past, you're going to raise your depression levels. So it's really important to just stay in the here and now and just really try to focus on that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's such a great point. And I always tell people, if you don't enjoy where you are now to a certain degree, and I know everyone's in different situations in their life and people are going through trauma, I'm not negating that, but for the most part in general, like if you can't find joy in where you are right now, I guarantee you when you get to the next level or whatever you want to call it, you won't enjoy that either. Like, because you'll always be thinking about the next thing and you'll always be thinking that, no, there's got to be more. So you have to find a way now to appreciate it right now, to appreciate where you are. And like you have a roof over your head, you have a beautiful dog, you have a career, you have a pot, like just take a collection and audit of all the great things that you have in your life. You have your health, like all those things. But people think, and this is a real misnomer, I think it's why a lot of celebrities struggle. They think that a certain amount of money or a certain level of fame is going to be, then I'll be happy. It's like, no, you won't, because you haven't figured it out up here yet. And so when you get to that next level, you'll still be unhappy, because you'll realize there's another level beyond that and someone else has something you don't have. So that mindset is so important for happiness.
Yeah. And I mean, you kind of walked right into the way I like to finish up these podcasts. And one question that I really love to ask people is, how do you define success?
Success. Success to me is being happy doing what you love. And so I know people who make, $20,000 a year and they're happy.
Yeah.
And because they do what they love, they have a part-time thing, they work with kids or they do whatever. So it's not money. Because, there's lots of other people who are millionaires and billionaires and they're miserable. They're absolutely miserable and they hate every day and nothing's good enough. So at the end of the day, it's being honest with yourself. What is it you love? Who are the people you want to be around? And just be happy doing that thing. And the rest of it's going to come and go and it will vary. But at the end of the day, if that's what you're doing, if that's what your true north is and you're following that, then you've been a success to me. That's what it's about.
Good words, wise words, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for being on today. And before you jump off, what's your kind of next year look like? What kind of projects are you getting up to? You got hours, 22 minutes? Yeah,
22 will start in the fall, hopefully, if everything keeps moving forward the way it is, which should be great. And so that'll be 6 months. I'm going to continue the podcast as well and keep that going. And then eventually want to get back on stage when we're allowed to go back and do stand-up. So I'll try and put all 3 pots back on the stove again at some point. But right now it's a waiting game for a couple of them. But kind of glad that the world's opening back up a little bit and weather's getting better. So that makes it a little bit easier too.
And where can people follow you as well as your podcast? And when is the podcast posted?
You can find me at trentscomedy.com. All my social media links are all there as well. The podcast normally drops every single week. And I talk to, actors, musicians, comedians, people, journalists, people from all different walks of life who talk about their creative process and a little bit about their life as well. It's a lot about resilience and tough times and stuff that they've overcome, and a real wide variety of guests, and every single episode I learn a ton of stuff from them. So I think when people listen, they take a lot from it too. So I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the more that you sit back and you listen, the more you're going to learn, because you can't learn new things when you're the only one talking.
That's right. That's why I need guests.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
Yeah.
It was interesting having you on today. It was a pleasure getting some good opinions, and I really appreciated your time. Thank you so much for jumping on, and hopefully you have a great evening.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, and I'll see you down the road for sure.
Thanks so much, Trent. Have a great night. Well, guys, I think that was a really great evening. I was so happy to get the chance to interview Trent. Please go follow him on his social media. Check out his podcast. I've been listening to a few episodes, and it's some good conversation. And I think that that's one thing that the world needs more of right now, is just really focusing on positive things and surrounding yourself with positivity. I know it can be really hard, and you can kind of get lost and keep telling yourself those negative mindsets and those negative thought patterns. So just try to surround yourself with positivity. Try to be filling your news feed and the time that you're spending on social media. Really try to follow positive people. And if you're noticing things in your news feed that are really negative, I encourage you to just unfollow those things and try to replace them with positive things, and just keep going, guys, and message me if you need anything. And that's all for this week. Have a great night, guys.